Other than that, it's time to get started. So please do use the team's reactions again to welcome Jeremy and Ant from Transport for New South Wales. And they're going to be discussing how their neurodiverse neighbourhood Viva Engage community came to life and how they've made it all align with the organisation's inclusion and diversity strategies. So over to you, Jeremy and Ant. Welcome.
Thanks, Emily, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. And it's great to be here today talking about our neurodiverse neighbourhood community. So I'll start with a couple of introductions. So my name is Jeremy Boel, and I'm the Manager of Digital Engagement at Transport, part of our internal strategic comms function. And I'm speaking to you today from the Gadigal lands of the Eora Nation. Ant.
Hello, everyone. This is Ant Rajay. I'm the Manager for Inclusion and Diversity at Transport, and I look after the disability and the multicultural portfolio. And I'm myself ADHD and deaf in my right ear and in Indian background, so I try to bring in my lived experience into my role. And I also want to acknowledge that I'm dialing in from the lands of the Gadigal people today. And I pay respects to all the elders, and I welcome any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander colleagues who are joining us today.
Thanks, Ant. So today we're going to run through a little bit about us as an organisation, our inclusion and diversity portfolio and how that really feeds into the neurodiverse neighbourhood. We'll give you some key takeaways, the lessons that we've learned along the way, and then we'll have some time for questions. So Transport is a very big organisation. You may know us from public transport, but we're also responsible for things like active transport, which is cycling and point-to-point, so your taxis and rideshare. Roads and waterways are another big part of our portfolio. Transport infrastructure, which is in the news at the moment, not necessarily for all the right reasons. We have a very diverse employee base. We have a lot of wired employees connected to computers all day, and unwired employees, people who are out in the field doing work. And that workforce is spread right across New South Wales, all 25,000 odd of us, from the far north to the south of New South Wales. Lots of frontline employees and the enablement function that Ant and I are part of that sits behind that. So why did we want to go down the Viva Engage path? Well, for us, having such a diverse and geographically spread workforce meant that we needed a platform that we could bring everybody together. We were split across a couple of different platforms. We had Workplace by Meta as one of our platforms. We had Viva Engage, which was just used sporadically. So we had a program which we migrated all of our Workforce by Meta employees over to Viva Engage so we could have a single platform for everybody, which would enable us to achieve some of our communications goals, things like having fewer emails clogging up people's inboxes, fewer newsletters, a far more responsive way to communicate with our people, the opportunity to crowdsource FAQs and connect our people to subject matter experts. We've already seen some great examples of that on Viva Engage. For example, we had some of our drone crews who work on the Sydney Harbour Bridge connect with drone crews who use drones to assess bridges in regional areas. Teams that hadn't met each other before who met through Viva Engage and were then able to start knowledge sharing. Another key thing for us is really humanising our leadership. So breaking down those barriers between our leadership and our frontline, having a more authentic and personal communications. So from the heart, short and sharp, less of that sort of corporate style messaging, and also enabling our leaders to be more responsive to ongoing employee feedback and ideas. So now I'm going to hand over to Ant to talk a bit more about our inclusion, diversity and wellbeing at Transport.
Thank you, Jeremy. So for us here at Transport, I think the key strategy we are part of the inclusion, diversity and wellbeing team, and our strategic purpose is to enable an inclusive workforce that is a positive, it creates a positive and a differentiated experience for the people of transport. So we have three different areas, or we call them portfolios. So one is inclusion and diversity. So like I said, talking about disability, multiculturalism, gender equity, and all those things come in that bucket. We have the reconciliation team. So we own and manage the stretch wrap across the organization. And we also have a well-being team that is dedicated around just the overall well-being initiatives, looking at employee burnout and the Are You OK and the mental health first aid initiatives. Next slide, Jeremy. So the key purpose or the key foundational elements for our inclusion, diversity, and well-being strategy are across these three areas, like we call them. One is like, how do we establish those foundations of inclusions? So basically, again, getting that purpose and our fundamentals right. How do we move from silos to communities? So like Jeremy was just saying, how do we connect people across the organization to come and talk to each other? And how do we build a future workforce that finds that where everybody finds that they are included? And what we realized that Viva Engage was one of the best platforms for us to activate this strategy into practice, because it helps us create that foundation. We can connect with different people on various topics of inclusion and diversity, and because it is the future of how people will operate and interact with each other. So we found that, as to Jeremy's point, that using this platform also is a really good way for us to activate our strategy, and again to get people involved and having those open dialogues. And that's where the neurodiverse neighborhood, I guess, fits in well. So I'll take you through the quick origin story, because every superhero has an origin story. Our story goes like almost a year ago. It started with what we call it, and this is a term we love in our group, is with a brain fart. And now you all know what a brain fart emoji looks like, so you're welcome. We basically were three neurodivergent individuals. So I'm myself ADHD. Jasmine on the image on the left, she is also proudly autistic, and Stephen McKee on the far right is also proudly autistic. We came together and we decided to kick off this neurodiverse network in August last year in 2022. And in case you were wondering, no, Osher is not part of our steering committee because he did not get a rose. So next slide, Jeremy. So what we first decided was that before we start and create our Viva Engage community, it was really important for us to, I guess, have a very clear and concise purpose that is easy to understand and for people to connect to and relate to. We did not want to boil the ocean, because if you know that neurodiversity is still a very new space, is constantly developing. A lot of people are not really sure about what it is and what it means. So we thought we first need to clearly articulate what our focus was, and that's where the focus and the purpose statement came in. Was we wanted to use the Viva Engage community to provide a safe space for all our neurodivergent colleagues to share, educate, learn, and connect, and for our neurotypical colleagues to learn and engage. So we didn't want it to be an exclusive group of only neurodivergent individuals. We also wanted to get neurotypical individuals on the journey as well. And for us, that the Soup Analytics dashboard has actually been like the guiding light, because it has always helped us to understand if we are actually staying true to our purpose or not, or if we are deviating from our purpose. So looking at the dashboard, we've got our own personalized dashboard set up, which tells us that are we on the right track or not. So that's really been very helpful to us. And as you know, that you can't improve or control what you can't measure. So that's where the analytics plays a really key part for us. And again, like I said, given the sensitivity of the topic, we really needed to be on top of what was happening in the community. So the two key, I guess, attributes that I wanted to call out here is, one, on the bottom right was the persona for us, because it was the catalyst persona, because this was a thought starter, and it was our effort to basically be a bit of a thought leader in this space at transport, because we've not had a network like this before. We wanted to just be those catalysts to start those discussions around neurodiversity. People start getting used to the term, they listen to it more often. So it was very important for us to kind of manage that overall persona for the community. And we're actually happy that it's in that catalyst zone, because that's what we've seen, that it's now actually triggering the right conversations across the network. And the other thing for us to focus was on the interactivity, because again, given the nature of the topic, it's not as fun as watching pets or food photos and stuff, because this was some things could be like triggering and they can be serious topics that are being discussed here. We were really keen to see what the interactivity level was. And what we found was it's really pleasing for us that in amongst all our communities over the 1 year that we've had it, actually 1.5, the Neurodiverse network is the second most interactive network, for only second to the pets at transport. So people are loving the pet pictures, but people are also loving the conversation in our network. So that's also been a very key driver for us to continue this work. Next slide, please. So what we've observed across the last 1.5 years in our network is we've actually seen a very high interaction with long form posts. And if you're a comms expert in the audience, you might know that that's actually really interesting. It kind of deviates from the norm where people want short, sharp, TikTok kind of style videos and 30 seconds of content and stuff. But here we've seen that people are writing authentic long posts, because if you know neurodivergent people love to hyper focus and then they overshare, because that's just comes naturally to us. But we've actually seen that that effort has been reciprocated in terms of how people are interacting. So they're actually reading the post, acknowledging someone's lived experience, and then responding to it. We have seen a lot of open, honest, and vulnerable conversations. We've had people either share their disclosure or their diagnosis journey or the challenge they might have with their neurodivergent kids and what that journey has been like. So we've seen a lot of those, and we have a few examples in the next slide. We've actually, in the last 1.5 years, we actually had to do very little to zero moderation. So we've never had an instance where we had to delete a post or reach out to a poster and say, hey, you cannot say that, because everybody's been so respectful of each other's lived experience. And what we've realized is that has a really strong power. But what we've also learned is that is only enabled by some strong support mechanisms in place. We have a few of us who are also mental health first aiders. So if someone responds to someone's post in a bit of a opposite way, or they provide an opposite viewpoint of view, we tend to reach out to that person and just check in with them to see if they're feeling okay, because we know that a lot of neurodivergent people also have rejection sensitivity. So we need to make sure that if someone's presented an opposing point of view, that they're feeling okay. So we do a lot of that as well. Like I had just one example yesterday. So when someone called out about discussions on labels and using labels to identify people, and someone said that they did not agree with the point of view, then I had to just do a quick check-in and to make sure that they're okay. So we realize the importance of having that support mechanisms for whatever your community is in place. And we've also had a lot of action focused discussions. So it's not just about discussions for the sake of discussions. We've had examples, and again, we'll show you one quickly, is where someone's post and a discussion resulted in a change in one of our recruitment process steps. So we actually took that conversation, converted that into an actionable item, and then actually presented that change back to the network members to show them that their conversations are actually important for us to make a positive difference in the workplace. Next slide, please. Uh, this is a lot of text, but basically what it is just examples of some raw, vulnerable stories of authentic, genuine lived experiences, which have generated a lot of respectful curiosity amongst our members. Bottom right, again, don't have to get into it, but when we first created the network, like I said, a year or 1.5 years ago, we were not sure what to post first. And one day I just had this thought, because I was kind of struggling with some rejection sensitivity because of something someone had said. And I just went and did a post on rejection sensitive dysphoria on the page, and I just shared it and I let it be. And I was kind of panicking because, oh my God, what have I done? But that post still remains one of the top 10 engaged posts since we've created that community, because a lot of people then resonated with it and connected with it and said, oh, thanks, that is what I was feeling. And now I know about this. So we are not shying away from discussing those topics. Up on from that post, you see this. Also, we have fun with memes. We do something called as Hyper Focus Fridays, where every Friday we have a fun topic and say, what are you hyper focusing on today? And we've had a lot of discussions around that. One of the most engaging ones were where someone compared their own life uh, with a role playing game, I think, like a first person role playing game like Dungeons and Dragons. And that had one of the most engaging conversations where a lot of neurodivergent people felt, oh my God, that is how I live my whole life, that kind of stuff. And we've had important discussions around disability and what it means to people. We've had in the middle, you see there's a long post where someone actually, like I said, called out a psychometric test step in our interview process. And they said, it did not make sense to them being neurodivergent because those questions does not apply to them at one particular moment in time. And actually our head of talent acquisition took that feedback because I flagged it with him. He then spoke to that individual on a Teams chat because that person was not comfortable to jump on a Teams call. He chatted with them to get their feedback, and now they've actually removed that step from the interview process if you identify that you're neurodivergent. So they actually took that conversation that was happening on the community, saw how much of interaction and how much of traction it was gaining to make an actionable change to the process. And that was well appreciated by the members. So that was just one example. Next slide, please. And here are just some of the feedback and some of what our members have said since we've created. So last year, earlier this year, we reached out to people when we've celebrated our anniversary and said, what do you feel that this community, Viva Engage community, has meant for them? And this is what they had to say. So I'll just let you guys read through that. My favorite one is the one in the middle, saying I feel seen, accepted, and hopeful. So again, coming back to the purpose and helping us, like Soups helped us to actually stay true to our purpose. And you can see the results here. Next slide, please. And I think I'm handing over back to Jeremy.
Thanks, Ant. So we've learned a lot of lessons along the way, and we've tried to distill some of those key lessons. So the first one is don't be afraid to jump in and start your community. Your people will help define and refine the purpose along the way. Be guided by your organization's values so you can live your organization's values. That was key for us to make sure that we were aligned to where we wanted to go as an organization, and that we reflected that in the way we managed the communities. Give people the space to be their authentic selves at work. That's absolutely crucial. We've seen, through this community and other communities, that it's had a really positive impact on well-being and productivity, and it makes people feel included, particularly, if you're working in a regional space where you don't necessarily have the in-person interaction with other people, or if you're able to connect with your tribe, as people have been able to do here. It's something that I've heard at a lot of presentations, and it's something that we've adopted as a bit of a mantra at Transport, which is the idea of purpose over polish. We find that not being too obsessed in terms of what content looks like, and really going for authentic and candid content really enables that genuine engagement. And finally, in the immortal words of Nike, just do it. Just jump in and get started. So that brings us to the end of our presentation, and now we'd like to throw to some questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jeremy and Ant. Thank you for sharing the story. Now, we have had a bit of interest in the Q&A, so I have a few questions from Dana, and I think some of these questions are related to Jeremy when you spoke towards the start of the presentation about moving across from workplace to Viva Engage. So the first question is, how long did it take you to embed the platform and see this level of collaboration?
That's a great question. It did take us quite some time, because a really key part of that migration activity for us was making sure that a lot of our stakeholders who had been using Workplace for a long time, they had established their communities, they had established their followings. Now, it's a big ask to get somebody to jump across to a new platform. So the stakeholder engagement piece was really big for us. It took us about 18 months all up from start to finish. But the net result of taking the time and really hand-holding those stakeholders along the way, showing them a lot of love, migrating content, was that some of the potentially more reluctant stakeholders are now some of the biggest users of Viva Engage.
That's great. And then just as a follow-up question to that as well, did Viva Engage replace other channels, and did that create a communications gap for people who may not use the platform?
It hasn't replaced other channels per se, and we are mindful of the fact that not everybody is looking at it all the time, probably not as much as and I love spending time on the platform. So it hasn't necessarily replaced other channels, but what we have been able to do is reduce the volume of content going out through other channels. We use other channels to direct people to conversations on Viva, Engage. So we have been able to reduce the volume of content that goes through other channels, and therefore the amount of noise that our people are exposed to.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. And then we had a question from Michael as well. I'll just read out this full question at the moment. So there are some good folks in our organisation looking to set up a neurodiverse network at the moment. They're currently going through some foundational exercises, charter creation, etc. But I'd love to know if there are any collateral or learnings that I can share with them after this session. Now, I know you had some of your key learnings, but wondering if there's anything else you'd like to share amongst, perhaps maybe, I'm not sure if Ant or...
I guess, talk to that. Like I said, we initially just spend more of our time, like I said, on just getting the purpose kind of locked in. And once we had that the purpose done, we just thought we'll just start with it and see how we go, because we wanted to test the waters in terms of what was the awareness level, what was the maturity of the audience in terms of understanding these topics. So I think I remember we creating one post to say what the purpose of our community was, and then just straight went into RSD or rejection sensitive dysphoria. And I was just going to say, if you do contact us outside of this, I'm happy to send through those articles, because a lot of them are generic in nature as well. So I'm happy to share some of those articles that we've posted, and feel free to use them as a form of just creating that initial engagement. What we've also followed then up with is we then have had live events or panel events where we open it for everyone to attend, where people with lived experience of neurodivergence share their experience, but then have those recordings and everything then again available on the Viva Engage community. So that's their one-stop shop for all their resources, so they can come back to it. So that also brings them back. So yeah, happy if you reach out to us, happy to share our resources, because they are.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for being so open to sharing these things too. It's a part of the reason why we love bringing together this community, you know, whether it's internal comms or if you're a community manager, we find people are so open to sharing, which is wonderful. And for your community, did you have dedicated moderators?
Interesting question. Not really, but these are the three founders that you saw. We just started doing things, and we suddenly then got interest from other people who then wanted to come and post and share a hyper-focus Friday idea. So we've kind of crowdsourced it and kept it open. And we thought, I mean, initially we did realize we're probably taking a risk here, but what we realized is that, again, through that respectful curiosity of getting to know something from a very genuine and authentic point of view, that's really helped us. And people have been open to sharing their stories. So no, we do not have dedicated moderators, but we always keep an eye out. Like I said, I spotted a response the other day, which I thought might actually trigger the original poster. So I then reached out to them, made sure they're okay, and that we've done as a community pretty well as well. And we even had other readers reach out to other posters and just check in and say that really resonated with me. Thanks for sharing. So it's become very organic.
Excellent.
I can perhaps touch on
Jeremy.
moderation as a whole, if you like. We do have a moderation panel in place, but our approach to transport is extremely light touch. We do have some guidelines in place, but our view is people should be able to share unvarnished opinions, and as long as they, don't breach any of our code of conduct rules, then we'll generally leave conversations in place, or step in to make sure people know that conversations are visible if they are potentially escalating. But we have a moderation panel in place as well, where if there is a potentially contentious post, we can crowdsource a decision on how we want to treat that.
That's a great insight. And perhaps, Jeremy, back to where you're talking a bit about the move from workplace to Viva Engage. Do you have any challenges with IT or governance teams at all?
We didn't have any challenges around IT. IT were very supportive, particularly given that, given the stringent rules around platforms we can use in government, and all the really fun stuff like where data is hosted. They were very keen for us to get over to Viva Engage. And in terms of the governance structure, we established the governance guidelines in consultation with the areas of the business that were moving over to Viva Engage. So there was no imposition of a new sort of regime or guidelines on people. We tried to make the transition as frictionless as possible.
And I know you mentioned, you did briefly mention about migrating data, but we just have a question here from Gareth, just out of curiosity. If you did migrate data, how many months of data, how many posts did you migrate across?
That's a good question. So it wasn't applied universally. It was just applied to the areas of the business that requested it, which also helped reduce the costs of data migration. I think it was at least 12 months of data that we migrated across, but we have also retained a couple of licenses on Workplace for admins. So people want to retrieve things that perhaps weren't migrated, we still have the capability to do that.
And do you hold any, maybe Ant, for the Neurodiverse Network, do you hold any live events in that community at all?
So I think, yeah, we do organize live events, but what happened was when we tried using the Viva Engage live event functionality to run some, the feedback we got from our Neurodiverse Neighbourhood members was that it was not very accessible, and there were some challenges, and mostly it is, I think, because not for the platform, but just for the adoption, so the speed of adoption and stuff, and the way the posts would come up as questions, so they were finding it very distracting. So based on that feedback around the accessibility of an event, because we wanted to focus more on the, I guess, the discussions, we moved these events to Teams. But then we make sure that we record them, they are transcribed, they've got a transcript running with them, and we then share an accessible version of the event back on our Viva Engage community. But yes, through the community's feedback, we chose Teams over doing a live Viva Engage event just because of from an accessibility point of view.
And if anyone is interested in Viva Engage live events, we do have a session later on today with Ryan from ANZ. He's got some really good insights to share too. We've got a few more minutes before we'll wrap up this Q&A portion. Out of curiosity, have you noticed any difference in the engagement on Viva Engage versus what you saw on Workplace? Have you noticed an improvement? What does that look like?
So we have noticed an improvement, particularly since the last, I guess, hangers on to Workplace migrated over. They did tend to be the most active users of Workplace, therefore they were the most reluctant to migrate to a new platform. We have seen, significant rise in engagement, particularly in some of those communities that are dedicated to specific areas of the business. And we've seen that then feed into some of our larger communities, like our all transport community, and some of the special interest communities that we have as well.
Now, this is probably quite a big question to leave for the last few minutes, but what are your plans for the phase around leadership engagement?
Oh, that is a very good question. Leadership engagement is, we find it a bit of a tricky one because it's really, we find, and I'd be very keen to hear how other people in the chat find it as well. Often it comes down to the personality of individual leaders and the behaviours modeled by leaders. We've been quite lucky in that we had a new secretary, a new head of transport, come on board a few months ago. So part of our strategy was to engage with him early, get him to understand the value of Viva Engage, and to establish his presence on the platform, which to his credit, he does himself. He doesn't have people posting on his behalf, which is brilliant. We really drove home the importance not just of posting, but also engaging with employees on the platform. And he's been really great at modeling that behavior, which then, has that effect of getting other leaders to start modelling that behaviour as well. In terms of our plans of what we want to do moving forward, one thing that I'm keen to do is to drive a bit of healthy competition amongst our top leadership cohort, which we call the L100, our top 100 leaders, by using the benchmarking capabilities in Swoop to set up a bit of a leaderboard, so our top leaders can have a bit of healthy competition to see who's driving the best engagement on the platform.
It's always good, isn't it? I know we've got a few. Oh, sorry, Ant.
I just want to add on that part, especially from a neurodiverse neighborhood perspective. So our chief people officer is also the exec sponsor for our disability strategy as well. And recently we'd had a event and stuff, and then we were like posting about the feedback about the event on Viva Engage. And then she actually, in one of the comments, she shared her personal experience of through a lived experience of a family member, how she's kind of navigating, understanding neurodiversity and stuff. And that again showed that the fact that she was being authentic, caring, and then she came from a point of lived experience. So in the neurodiverse neighborhood, we are taking an inclusion and diversity overall in our team. We take this storytelling approach where we try to learn from people's lived experience and listen to their stories. And that's what our exec sponsor, Tracy Taylor, she does it really well. And that's why we've seen, like, in this space, we get a very good engagement every time. And like during the World Autism Awareness Month, or be it the ADHD Awareness Month, she always wants to have a post out there and to remind people of her story. And that gives us a really good engagement there. So we're kind of lucky in that way.
Fantastic. And I just want to say another massive thank you. We had more questions, but we've got to move on to the next portion of today. So massive round of applause for Jeremy and Ant.